Imagine you're alone in the woods, and all of a sudden it becomes eerily quiet. Too quiet. The birds and the bugs stop singing. Even the wind stops its rustle of leaves. A silence so complete, it makes the hairs on your neck stand up. You're alone, but you can't shake the feeling that something else is out there with you. Welcome to my creepy encounter. The crisp autumn air settled over the quiet community by Lake Tillery, a serene retreat nestled against the Uwharrie National Forest. It was a haven for those seeking a peaceful escape, a place where golf carts replaced cars and nature provided the entertainment. I had spent nearly a decade enjoying this retreat, adding a deck, a tin roof, and a small shed to my 35-foot fifth-wheel camper. The forest behind my lot teemed with wildlife. Deer, raccoons, and opossums frequently visited, drawn by the salt lick and scattered corn. Most mornings, I would sit on my deck, coffee in hand, watching them drift in and out of the trees. But one morning in early fall, that tranquility was shattered. My wife was away on a beach trip, leaving me to enjoy a long, quiet weekend alone. Rising at 5:30 a.m., I brewed my coffee and stepped out onto the deck. It was still pitch black, the only illumination coming from a distant streetlight. I settled into my chair, savoring the stillness, until a sudden blur of movement caught my eye. A mother fox, whom I had seen frequently over the past few weeks, burst from the woods at a full sprint. Her tiny frame was a streak of rust-colored fur as she veered sharply and disappeared down the road. Something was chasing her. I stood, heart pounding, my gaze locked on the woods. Then came the growl. It was deep, guttural, and impossibly loud, so powerful it vibrated in my chest and sent every hair on my body standing on end. Instinctively, I pressed my back against the camper, drawing my 9mm from its holster. My breath came in shallow gasps as silence swallowed the world. Another growl rumbled through the darkness, followed by the high-pitched whimpers of fox pups. Then, bang! A metallic crash echoed through the night, originating from an old oil drum 2 lots away. A pup yelped, a sound so brief as if something had snuffed it out mid-cry. And then, silence. Not the usual quiet of the early morning, but an unnatural void. The crickets, which had been singing moments before, had gone silent. Even the leaves ceased rustling. The air grew thick with an unbearable stench, a putrid mix of rotting flesh and skunk musk. It was suffocating. A minute passed, though it felt like an eternity, before the silence was shattered. A heavy thud reverberated through the ground, followed by another. Whatever had been lurking in the darkness was moving, and it was massive. The rhythmic pounding of its steps revealed its bipedal nature. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a deer. It was something else. Branches cracked, trees groaned, and the forest itself seemed to part as this thing stormed away into the night. I retreated inside, bolting the door behind me. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stood in the darkened camper, weapon in hand, listening for any sign of its return. None came. Only when the sun rose and the community stirred did I dare step outside. The morning light revealed broken tree limbs, some hanging at least 8 feet high. No tracks were visible through the thick carpet of pine needles, but the damage left in its wake was undeniable. I never saw the creature again, but I didn't need to. The growl, the scent, and the sheer terror of that night remain seared into my memory. Something lives in those woods. Something powerful. Something unseen. And it's still out there. The Terror of the Ridge. My grandfather, Marcus Miller, we all called him Mac, was the kind of man who seemed carved from granite. A retired Army Ranger, he'd seen more of the world's ugliness than most, and nothing seemed to faze him. When he and my grandmother decided to retire, they bought 200 acres deep in the North Georgia mountains, a remote property bordered by the Chattahoochee National Forest. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could hunt and fish in complete solitude, far from the noise of civilization. He spent months building a custom hunting blind, a fortress of a thing, a full 15 feet off the ground in the crotch of a massive, ancient oak tree. It was his throne, his quiet place. He went up there almost every evening in the fall, a ritual of peace and patience. It was a crisp, late November night last year, just a week before Thanksgiving. The air was frigid, the kind of cold that bites at your ears. He was in his stand, 1,500 feet from the house, facing north, watching the moonlight filter through the bare branches. That's when he heard it. The sound was distinct, a slow, heavy crunch of leaves coming from the south. He assumed it was a fellow hunter, or more likely a lost hiker. He knew his property line well, and whoever it was had wandered onto his land. When the footsteps were about 50 feet away, he put a hand to his mouth and yelled out a warning. "Hey, you're on private property. Turn around and get out of here." The footsteps came to an abrupt halt. A silence so profound fell over the woods that it felt like a living thing, a heavy blanket of dread. Mac felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The crunching sound had been so certain, so solid, but now it was gone. He leaned forward, straining to hear, when the next sound came. It was an impossible sound. In just 3 rapid, crushing strides, whatever it was had closed the 50-foot gap and was now directly behind him, at the base of his tree. He turned, his body rigid with fear, and peered over the edge of the platform. A massive, shadowy figure stood beside the oak tree, half hidden by its wide trunk. It was far too tall to be a man, and its silhouette was all wrong for a bear. It was a dark, upright shape that moved with a terrible, unnatural grace. It immediately turned and looked directly at him. Matt couldn't see his face in the moonlight, but its eyes, glowing with a faint, malevolent red, seemed to bore directly into his. He was frozen in terror. He managed to find his voice again and yelled, a mix of defiance and pure panic. The creature responded instantly. It let out a guttural, terrifying roar, a sound that seemed to shake the very leaves from the trees. Enraged, it moved closer to the tree trunk and did something that defied all logic. It jumped. The creature launched itself upward with astonishing force, a powerful leap that sent the entire tree blind swaying violently. Its hands, huge and black against the moonlight, scraped against the bottom of the stand, a full 15 feet above the ground. Mac, in a state of pure survival-fueled terror, fumbled with his rifle. He was so terrified that his hands were shaking uncontrollably, and he dropped the rifle over the rail. It fell to the ground with a sickening clatter, leaving him defenseless. The creature landed with a thud, and in a flash, it was at the base of the tree again, preparing for another, more powerful jump. Mac knew he was remaining coffee and a handful of ice from the cooler over it. The creature let out a low, mournful cry and recoiled. He followed up by tossing the cooler at it too. It turned and tore off towards a neighboring tree line by the creek. Mac watched as the creature stopped at the edge of the forest. It stood there, partially hidden by a crook in a large oak, and watched him, rocking slowly, from side to side. Then, a sudden cold realization washed over Mac, so powerful it almost knocked him off his feet. His Colt 1911, it was in the bottom of his rucksack. He'd forgotten he had it. He fumbled for it, pulled it out, and fired a shot toward the top of the creature's head, but it was too far away. He racked another round, and just as he did, the creature turned and disappeared into the brush, gone from sight. He only took one shot, but he is confident that he missed by a significant margin. Max stayed in the blind for what felt like hours, gun in hand, waiting for the sun to rise. When he finally made it home, he was pale as a sheet and sobbing. It was the first time in 32 years that my grandmother had seen him cry or act in any way that indicated he was terrified. Since that day, he has not gone beyond the tree line that surrounds the house, and he will not even leave the patio once the sun has set. The chilling finale came a couple of weeks ago. Mac's truck had some mechanical trouble on the long dirt road that runs from the barn to the house. It was in the middle of a bright afternoon, and he found himself stranded, only 700 feet from his front door. Instead of walking home, he locked himself in the truck and started phoning people. He left a hysterical voicemail for my dad, sobbing and begging him to come to his aid. My dad, who lives an hour away, had to drop everything to go give this hardened combat veteran a 20-second ride from his front yard to his front door. Mac now carries a .44 Magnum firearm on him at all times, a constant reminder that some terrors can't be fought with bullets alone, and they leave a mark that never truly fades. From the time I turned 12, my father and I spent countless hours in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. We hunted, we explored, we became one with the forest. But Dad always had one rule: never ever go out into the pines at night. The locals, a superstitious bunch, spoke of things that lurked in the dark, things that defied explanation. I was a cocky teenager, sure I knew those woods better than anyone, convinced there was nothing to fear. Dad, however, was always right. After getting my driver's license, my parents bought me a Dodge D50 pickup truck. One restless night, bored with the usual hangouts, a reckless idea sparked in my head. I'd take 2 of my buddies on an adventure into the Pine Barrens. The others didn't need convincing. We set out for a night we would never forget. As we drove, dusk bled into darkness. We followed Route 72, made a right onto Route 563, and passed through the ghostly stillness of Chatsworth. Not a single car, not a single soul. We had the world to ourselves. After crossing a bridge, I took a hard right onto a narrow dirt road. The darkness closed in on us, thick and suffocating. It was so black I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. The river, a black ribbon of water, was a constant presence to our right. The road became a trail, and I followed it for 5 miles into the heart of the pines, the truck bumping along until it could go no further. We parked, grabbed our flashlights and K-bars, and continued on foot. The air was unnervingly silent. The pines were so quiet, the silence almost screamed. We didn't need our flashlights, though. The sand in the pines, a strange ethereal white, seemed to glimmer, illuminating the trail. We walked on, hearing the murmur of the creek and the rustle of small things in the brush. Then we saw them. Deer, their forms indistinct in the gloom, drinking from the river. I flashed my light on them, and 2 pairs of glowing green eyes stared back. They ignored us, unfazed, dipping their heads back down to the water. It was a beautiful, serene sight, a fleeting moment of peace before the terror set in. A few yards later we heard it, not the delicate crunch of a deer, but something else, a heavy, methodical crashing in the trees. We froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, a prickling sensation that I knew instinctively meant danger. My internal alarms were ringing. My friends and I aimed our flashlights at the sound. Nothing. Wait, something was there. The patch of woods where we had heard the crashing was darker than the rest of the forest. The light could not penetrate it. It was a hole in the night, a void darker than the darkness itself. As we crept closer, a chill sweeping through the air, it turned. It was looking at us. All of us. All at once. We were transfixed, our feet rooted to the ground. It was in the eyes. I've never seen eyes like them. Two brilliant, malevolent orbs of glowing red, the size of jawbreakers. We babbled to each other, a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. The thing just stood there, watching us, and we couldn't look away. What was it? A deer? A bear? It didn't have the shape of either. It had no shape at all, just a formless, shifting blackness. The stalemate was broken when the creature suddenly lowered its head to the ground and then, with a horrifying dragon-like extension, brought it up again toward us. It moved its head slightly to the side, a gesture that was both curious and menacing. My mind screamed, "What am I looking at?" That was all the warning we needed. We bolted. My friends and I ran like scared children, a wild panic urging us back toward the truck. I was in the lead, the keys clutched in my hand, my only thought to get the hell out of there. My friends were right behind me. I didn't hear anything chasing us, but I didn't need to. The thought alone was enough to keep us moving. I fumbled with the keys, cranked the engine, and put my foot on the gas just as my two friends slammed the doors shut. We sped away, leaving the silent, menacing woods behind us. To this day, that terrifying night lives on in my memory, a chilling reminder that some things are better left alone. We never did go back, not to the Pine Barrens, and certainly not at night.
McDermott, Nevada, was a town of quiet isolation, a dusty smudge on the map with a few gas stations and bars. I was a deputy sheriff in the late 1970s, and to keep my sanity, I'd escape on my days off. I had a few secret spots, places where the silence was so profound it felt like a physical presence. I'd take my Chevrolet 4x4, a small camper slide-in on the back, and my Colt Python always at my side. One particular trip, I was camped near a small brook at the foot of a steep hill. Sometime after 2 a.m., the stillness shattered. I was jolted awake by a violent shaking. The camper was being rocked back and forth so hard I feared the truck would roll onto its side. It wasn't the gentle sway of a scratching cow, an animal I'd encountered before on other trips. This was a brutal, purposeful force. My first thought was that some of the guys from town had found my spot and were playing a prank, but there was no laughter, no voices, just the terrible, silent assault on my truck. It went on for what felt like an eternity before it abruptly stopped. I swung out of bed, grabbed my Colt Python, and pushed open the camper door. The night air was cold and heavy. I scanned the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. Nothing. Then I heard it. A rustling of loose rocks and gravel. A sound of displacement coming from the impossibly steep hillside behind the truck. I strained my eyes in the pale moonlight, and there it was. A massive, humanoid shape scaling the hill with an impossible speed and agility. I couldn't make out any details, but its sheer size and the way it moved sent a jolt of pure dread through me. It was too big to be a man, and the slope it was ascending was unclimbable. I spent the rest of the night with my rifle clutched in my hands, unable to sleep. At dawn, I finally got out of the camper. What I saw made the blood run cold in my veins. Along the top edge of the camper, I found 2 large indentations, each about 8 inches wide and spaced roughly 3 feet apart. It looked like some monstrous hand had gripped the camper with terrifying force, leaving imprints in the metal. The sight of those marks, so impossibly large and strong, was sickening. Then I saw the rocks.
The ground around my truck was now littered with basketball-sized rocks arranged in a neat circle. They weren't just randomly tossed, they were placed with a strange, deliberate care, as if to surround and trap me. I never told anyone what I saw. I didn't need to. The feeling of being watched, of being held and tormented by an unseen presence in the dead of night, was a secret I carried with me. Needless to say, I never went back to that spot again.
Thanks for watching. What whispers do you hear when the lights go out? If you have a creepy encounter you'd like to share, you can send it to mycreepyencounter@gmail.com. If you've had a moment when the world felt just a little bit wrong, leave a comment below. Until next time, stay safe and remember, you're never truly alone out there.